the state or government comes in and says, hey, we're going to take over control of your business. Kind of lost my paycheck there. I gave that back to that company to just survive, right? And so I needed to go out and figure out a way to make more money. And it's not always easy, and your temper's short, and you're exhausted, and you're stressed. Yeah, and we all struggle with some of that stuff, right?
If you had to tell the audience one of the most difficult things about owning rentals, what would be that one thing?
You know, some people think that they're going to buy rental properties, put them on cruise control, they're going to make money and passive income. As you know, it's not really such a thing. How many times this has happened to me that I've had somebody on a pedestal, I meet them, and I'm not saying, oh, they're good or bad, but then I'm like, that's them? They're just a normal person? Well, if they can do it, so can I.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chris Naugle, and welcome to the Money School podcast. Today's episode is an extra special one. It's an in-person with a good friend of mine, somebody that literally, he doesn't know this, but somebody that literally helped keep me from going bankrupt. His name's Kevin McMullen. He has gone from entrepreneur to almost broke to one of the top real estate investors in this area. I can't wait for you to hear his story and hear how he has failed and come out of that failure raging. So this podcast is the first one we've done live in this studio. So it's extra special to me, and it's going to be extra special to all of you. So let's dive into Kevin's story and how he's done what he's done. Well, hey, Kevin, thanks for coming in and doing this podcast. Listen, I was thinking about what to talk about with you,
Sure.
And I have to start with back to 2008.
Yep.
And I don't know how much you remember that, but
A little bit.
I embarked on that beat up paint store, and I was going to convert it into the strip mall. And I remember I got halfway through it, the Great Recession hit,
Yep.
and I almost went bankrupt.
Sure.
I don't know if I ever told you this story.
I have heard it because I do listen to you and watch you online, so I've gotten some versions of it.
But I don't know if you know your piece of the whole thing.
So the part that I remember was being in the next building over looking at a spot, right? So I had just started my business the first year, which was a video game store. It was doing really well, and I was looking to expand. I was in the next plaza over, and I think I saw probably your phone number, the for lease sign. And so I didn't like what I heard from the owner of the next building over, so I called you, and that's probably where you can pick it up.
Yeah, so I remember that call, and that call came at a really pivotal time because I was just about to go bankrupt. I probably had 1, maybe 2 months of payments left that I could make to those hard money lenders.
Yeah.
And the building wasn't completely done because you remember when you first came in,
Yeah.
your space was just a disaster.
Yeah, it was a shell, yeah.
And if I didn't rent that space or have a lease signed for that space, the bank, First Niagara Bank, wouldn't give me the mortgage.
It's wild how things come together sometimes just when you need it, right?
And I remember you showed interest, and I'm like, I have to make this work.
Had I known how desperate you were, I might have gotten a better deal.
I didn't want to lay all the cards on the table, but yeah, I thought it was a pretty good deal.
I was very happy. To this day, my store is still in that building.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I haven't been over that way in a while.
You know what's funny is it's sold twice over since you sold it. And
Wait, the strip mall sold, I know I sold it, and then it sold again?
it sold again, yeah. Probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
For how much?
You know what? I probably should know that, and I probably did know when it happened, but I don't remember. But the owner now retail's in tough position. You know, I have the store still one location still open. I had 6 in my peak, and I've got some debt on the books from when we went sideways. I had 50 some employees, 6 locations. My brother's employed there. So once that debt's paid off, I'll probably write off in the sunset because of where I am today and the things I'm doing now. But it did sell. Like I said, it sold a second time, and he wanted, the new owner wanted me to sign a lease. And I'm like, dude, if I have to sign another lease, I've been on month to month for literally 10 years, paying my rent on time, right? So I get it being a real estate owner, that side of it, but also I was just like, listen, dude, you're going to have a vacant storefront here if you're going to force me into a lease. And he was cool about it. He's been really good. So we are still there. And I think 2008, 2024, it's been a hell of a run.
It's just crazy to think that it was that long ago.
I know.
I mean, you said 10 years, and I'm like, holy cow, 10 years was 2014. that was when I sold the strip mall.
Yeah.
Like I owned it from '08. I developed it in '08 and I sold it in '14. And, I didn't make a ton, but I probably made a little over $100,000 on it, which
Well,
was
and it served
so
its
vital.
purpose too
It
for
did.
you, right? You had your retail location.
And when
you
I
met me.
sold it, that's what kicked off the flipping.
Yeah.
That was the seed capital to pay for all the flipping.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's just crazy. And I didn't know you were still there.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that business, Oogie Games, is still
Yep.
there.
Yeah.
So you think eventually, like, no hopes of selling Oogie Games, getting GameStop to buy it?
No, I think unfortunately, the state of retail and a lot of my business went online, and I think that was the start of it, right? And I tell people all the time, we were at 6 locations, and I probably made as much money with 6 locations as I did with 1. Because with 1 location, I was behind the counter, and then, the growth curve happens, and you start to take on more stores, more debt, working capital, I guess you could say, overhead. And, I had conversations with companies to franchise, and that was kind of when we started to see some of the issues, right? And I threw some money at it. It didn't straighten it out, and we kind of took the role of, hey, let's cut back here, and I eventually moved on into real estate, which with some of your guidance has been incredible.
Well, that's what I want to do. I want to pivot and transition over to that next phase.
Yeah.
So, because I remember you behind the counter at Oogie Games every day, but I also remember watching your success go up in more locations. And obviously, a lot of things change as success comes on. And you improved your cars and a lot of different things. But where did the actual transition? What was the pivot for you to go into real estate, and how did that happen?
It was probably 6, 7 years ago. At this point, I had 6 retail locations, I had video game stores, and then I actually had franchised or licensed Metro PCS, which is part of T-Mobile. So I had an opportunity to develop some of their locations. And very quickly, we were doing really well. And within the first year, I had a bigger franchise or a bigger licensee reach out to me and say, hey, listen, like, what's it going to take to buy your stores? So, we kind of did some negotiations over 6 months. And I sold those 4 locations, did very well on them within the year. And then it was like, all right, what's next? And there's always kind of been this itch for real estate. And that's kind of when I took the jump. I think if you remember, you had wholesaled me. I had already owned a duplex. You wholesaled me a triple and a double package deal.
Stupidest thing I ever did.
Bro, the cash.
I don't want to know.
I can't tell you the money
My wife
I've
brought
made.
it up the other day, knowing that you were coming in. I truly don't even want to know, because those were really good.
I will tell you, the 3-unit, I'm crushing it on. The 2-unit, I still have the same tenants. And when I tell you that, that's the headache part of the deal. So it wasn't all good. It wasn't all good. But with that being said, there's plenty of meat on the bone in both of those, and I've done very well. And so that's kind of, so I took that money when I sold the cell phone stores, bought those 5 units from you, and that got me to 7 units total. And then I actually flipped my first house, which I didn't even own. It was a neighbor's house, and I did very well with that. And the rest is history. 7 years later, 30 units. Ended up getting my real estate license in the meantime to sort of self-serve my flips and my rentals for access. And now I'm a top 50 real estate agent in Western New York out of roughly 4,000, 4,500. So it's good. They all kind of work off of each other, from the real estate agent to the flips and then the rentals.
Yeah, I remember when you did your first flip, I'm like, oh, wow, because we were flipping a lot of houses at the time, and Larissa did what you did. She got her license just to self-serve, and she never really became a public agent. She always just did our stuff, and then you did that. But I remember you were making more money on your flips. You were doing a lot of the work yourself.
So, when I started, I did a lot of the work just out of necessity, right? I was taking on a lot of debt with the video game stores, and so I kind of lost my paycheck there. I gave that back to that company to just survive, right? And so I needed to go out and figure out a way to make more money. And so to start, I did a lot of the work just to see if I could prove that this concept would work. So for me, to flip 2 or 3 houses a year and really oversee the project, I liked that control. Now, I know you've done as much as 10 to 15 projects a month, and I'm watching you pull out your hair the entire time.
The whole time. I can't believe my hair's not all gray right now.
Mine's pretty gray and it's running away, so I'm not saying that's the
just
reason
age.
why, but yeah, we're not getting any younger. But no, I liked being on the project every day, sort of GCing it, picking out the designs and the paint colors, and I had there was a lot of enjoyment out of that. So between that and acquiring the rentals and then getting my real estate license to self-serve, I had zero intentions of becoming a salesperson. That just wasn't my goal, right? And being pretty well connected in Buffalo and it being a smaller city/town, people just kept coming to me, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to turn away the business. So, my first year I did 2 million, and then my second year I did 4, and it kept doubling every year. To this past year, I did 12 million in sales, and it's like, well, okay, now that's just another source of income, and it helps feed my flips and my rentals.
And how many flips are you doing a year now?
So I'm still only doing a couple, but what I've been doing is I haven't been selling them. I'm just buying them and holding them, because every time I was selling the flips, I'd watch the market increase year over year 15 to 20%, and I'm like, all right, that nice hit of money is great, but then I got to pay tax on it. I'm just going to hold this thing, rent it out, refinance it, and pull the money back out. So that's, I've gotten some single family homes, great deals on them, seeing them go down the sales side of it, and yeah, it's a great profit up front, but I don't need that anymore. I don't need that quick hit of cash. I'm in it for the long run now.
I think that's really smart. And it took Larissa and I a lot longer than it should have to kind of jump on that. We were just flipping, doing a couple wholesales, because flipping is just a cash monster.
Yeah.
It takes so much
Yep.
money. So the wholesale business was out of pure necessity just to keep operations going, to pay Shauna and everybody
Yep.
else that was working for us. But we eventually had a couple flips that weren't good. Like, we
Sure.
weren't going to make much money. And I started looking at it saying, all right, well, let's refinance these, rent them out, do the BRRRR method.
Yep.
And that's how I started building that rental portfolio up.
Sure.
And that ended up getting up to, I think we got up to 91 or 92 doors before I started liquidating and selling them off during the
Right.
pandemic. And I should have waited a couple of years.
Sure.
When the pandemic hit, the laws in New York were just not favorable for landlords.
No, that was brutal.
So I had squatters living in houses that I couldn't evict. I couldn't do anything. Cops wouldn't help me.
Yep.
I had tenants that just said, I'm not paying you anymore. The state says I don't have to pay you and you can't kick me out. I had one guy show up, and I remember, do you know who Demetrius? Like, he was like a young guy that like kind of used to kind of intern with us.
Yeah.
He now owns a big construction company, but he was there, and one of these tenants came in that I was arguing with, and the tenant physically wanted to fight me.
That's wild.
And I thought there was going to be a brawl out in the front of the flip office
Yeah,
space.
unfortunately, the state that we live in is not really favorable towards homeowners or landlords, right? But unfortunately, this is where I live, and this is where I choose to do business right now. But yeah, there are some hurdles there. I'm a very type A personality in the sense that I like to have control. And when somebody, i.e. the state or government, comes in and says, hey, we're going to take over control of your business. Now, they would never do that. And well, they shut down restaurants, but would they ever walk into a restaurant, have the customer eat their dinner, and then say, hey, you don't have to pay for that. You can leave. That's basically what they did to us as landlords, right? They told our paying customers that they didn't have to pay for the goods that they were using, which is just insane to me. I still can't get over it.
Have you ever thought deeper about why? I tend to be one of those people that, like, when something happens, I start looking behind the scenes and start saying, why would they do that?
Yeah, I don't think that's something that we really want to get into here, or I don't want to
We
get
can.
into.
If you don't want to, that's fine.
I just, yeah, it's not a path that I really want to go down, but it's unfortunate. And, I used to hear, growing up, my dad, sort of bitch about taxes and things like that. And I think as a kid and a teenager and then into your 20s, you never really understood it. And then once you start making real money and you say, where's that portion of my taxes going and what are they doing with it? That opens your eyes a little bit and you're just, you're like, wow, right? That's all I can say is wow. But I will say for the most part, some people think that they're going to buy rental properties, put them on cruise control, they're going to make money and it's passive income. As you know, it's not really such a thing, right? You're still babysitting them, even if you have a property management company. Every time it rains, it snows, there's heat, there's cold, stuff breaks. And, there's tenants that don't pay and they pay late. And listen, if you don't treat it like a job, then you're not going to be successful at it.
So Kevin, I'll never forget that day I met with you at Starbucks where you asked me about the infinite banking concept and you said, I got to get into this. What turned you on to that?
I think the number one thing that turned me on to that was really gaining control of your money and not having the traditional banks be in control. I'm a type A personality. I love control.
I mean, the best thing you can ever do is take back control of your money. And, the fact that, because I don't really do much marketing here in this local area, and the fact that you reached out to me because you wanted to take control and you wanted to be the bank meant a lot. And I know that it's helped you tremendously because I know we've had lots of conversations on how you've used it. And you've actually had some times, like you mentioned, in the podcast that we did, where you were down in your luck.
Yep.
And that policy and that the banking system has been able to pull you out of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we talked about it before. You're specializing, you're the best of the best, and that's where you need to go.
Awesome. Well, folks, if you want to learn more about how you can be your own bank, there's a 90-minute video. Yes, I know 90 minutes sounds like a long time, but it's not, and it will change your life. So watch the 90-minute video and book a call with our team, and we'll show you how to be the bank. If you had to tell the audience one of the most difficult things about owning rentals, what would be that one thing that you hate more than anything else?
I just don't like chasing people down for money. We've entered into an agreement. We have a contract. I've given you a beautiful place to live. And at the end of the day, you need to pay for it, right? And at any time, if you want to leave, I let my tenants, listen, if you get a new job or you're moving out of town or you just can't afford the place, it's open communication. Tell me, I will let you go. I know when I rent my places, I've completely remodeled them. There's a line down. I have no problem renting them out again. But the second you stop paying for it, or pardon my French, try to me over, right? You've agreed, and I've agreed. I've got to stand up to my obligation. When you call me and the sewer's backed up or something breaks, I have to fix it. Just like at the first of the month, you need to pay rent, right? So, and again, going through the COVID thing, I think initially tenants had gotten a lot more lackadaisical with, oh, well, we don't take your business seriously. We deserve to be here. Well, you deserve to go buy your own house, right? And I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I've spent a lot of time and money making this house a home and a nice place to live. So I guess, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it is just making sure you've got a good tenant. And now, I think over the last year or two, that we come out of that, and I think that with anything, right, whatever your career choice is or business that you're asking for a discount from, you got to understand what comes with that, right? When you get pushed down the line or you don't get the service that you want, or, not to sound like a jerk, if you want that discount real estate agent, you're going to get that discount real estate agent. When in reality, you should want the best of the best and not care how much you pay because you're purchasing or selling probably the most expensive possession that you own. And that's the part that blows my mind. And I say this a lot, and I've done some social media reels on it. And it's sort of a joke, but it's real when you think about it. You go to Aunt Susie. Sorry, Aunt Susie. I'm not picking on you, but I kind of am. And she does 2 or 3 transactions a year, and you want her to buy or sell and negotiate the most expensive purchase of your life to date, the most valuable asset you own. At 2 or 3 transactions a year, how can you possibly know the market conditions, tuned your craft, it's just, you can't be at the top of your game. And the one thing that I compare it to is when I got LASIK, right? Do I want the surgeon with a laser cutting my eye open that does it twice a year, or the one that does it twice, 3, 4 times a week?
I think you want the specialist.
Right. I want the best of the best, because that's one of the most valuable possessions that I have are my eyeballs that we all have. And it's not a problem until it's a problem. And you don't know you have a bad salesperson or a bad real estate agent till it's too late. You've already signed the contract. You're in the shit. You're in the weeds. There's a problem. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do.
Well, I'm glad you talked about Aunt Susie, because that's exactly where I wanted to go next. After COVID, or actually during COVID, a lot of people were out of work and they were looking for what they're going to do next, and they landed in real estate.
Sure.
And a lot of them became Aunt Susie realtors.
Yep.
It just seems like you can't go anywhere. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't go to a bar. You can't go to a function, a charity event without meeting at least 5 realtors.
And that's
everybody's a realtor.
Western New York.
Little
Go to
Buffalo,
Florida.
New York. Yeah.
Go to Florida. Everybody's a real estate agent in Florida. I hear the numbers are insane. And that's fine, right? You can sell 1 or 2 houses in Florida, and you're selling $1 million houses. Not saying it's any better, but you're right. The number of real estate agents is, it's crazy.
But they're doing it as a part-time job.
Sure.
Because they think, I'm going to sell 1 house and I'm going to ride off into the sunset. And
Right. They're going to pay for a vacation. It's a little spending money. I don't know how seriously you should or could take somebody that's doing that, right?
Well, I don't take them serious at all. Matter of fact, I can't stand it.
Sure.
It drives me absolutely bonkers.
Well, it makes our job, right, a little more difficult, because you get somebody on the other end that doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. They're uneducated. They're just not up to date or up to par on the market conditions.
Why don't you think the industry does a better job of making that barrier of entry a little bit harder or a little bit higher, so that you do weed out some of the people that just are like, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to give this a whirl. Because the test really isn't all that hard.
That is interesting. And I will say that, every 2 years we've got to do some continuing education. And a lot of people, and I've caught myself complaining about it. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. Why do I need to go get 22 and a half more credit hours, right? And then I'm like, you know what? That's fine. Make it more. I want more education, right? And I want the fees to be higher, because that's going to weed out a lot of the people that are doing it part-time that don't need to be or deserve to be in the field. So, I agree. I think it does need to be a little more difficult. I think the fail rate is incredible. It's very high, incredibly high, of real estate agents coming in. Because here's the thing, man, like my first year was just, you're not making much, if not any money. So once you get started, not only do you need to have another source of income, but you need to give it your all like it is a full-time job. And to give it your all like it's a full-time job and not necessarily get paid is difficult for a lot of people to do. And unfortunately, I just don't think that most people have that commitment to do that the right way. So I've seen a lot of younger, aggressive, newer real estate agents come in, and you get it or you don't. And the ones that get it, you can just tell. Like they're making the calls, they're putting in the hours, they're asking the right questions, they're doing the open houses, right? Like they're just doing everything they can to get themselves out there, the social media, and I love to see that, because it's, you get it or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you get it, you're going to do very well.
Well, there's something I've watched your career, from afar, but there's some interesting things I've seen you do, and I want to talk about them. And I don't even know if you do it for that reason, but you spend a lot of time helping with charities.
Sure.
Actually, I think you sit on a board, or you're pretty high up in it, but you didn't always used to be. And it takes a lot of your time.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy. And I've watched your commitment to that.
Sure.
So when people are listening to this podcast, when they're thinking about, how do I spend my time? I got to go hustle and do this. You carve out a lot of your time to help other people, to help raise money for good causes. Like, why do you do that? Is it just something that you've always had? Is it something that you understand the universal law? Or just talk a little bit about that.
Growing up in a blue collar family, right? My dad worked very hard. My mom was a homemaker. We had 4 kids. Here in Western New York, seeing some of the struggle, and we never really had any health issues, which my dad did die young, and I'm not attributing that to this, but I just, with the small community that we live in, giving back, and I don't want to say, oh, I'm giving back to promote my business, but when I was in my 20s and into my 30s, the feeling that I got to be able to give back and help people, I just don't know how to explain it, because I don't want to say, oh, I'm doing it for the feeling, right? But there is some sort of aspect of the people that you surround yourself with, right, that do give back, and you network with them. I don't know. It's just something that I do, and I enjoy it. It's Make-A-Wish, the Bison Foundation, and even when I own the retail stores, I must get 10 asks a day from, fundraisers and baseball teams and, whatever it was. And it was just, for me, all right, that $25 or $50 gift certificate going out the door can raise money to help somebody. I've sat on the board of Make-A-Wish for, I think, 8 or 9 years now, chair of the gala committee, some things like that. And yeah, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And, the older you get, you start to have a wife and kids and multiple businesses. Sometimes it does get a little more difficult. It's just always been part of my philosophy to try to give back to the community, right, and the less fortunate, because I've been on both sides of it, right?
No, I think you've done a fantastic job.
Your real estate business lives and dies by the network and the connections that you make. I mean, after all, your network, well, it's your net worth. That's what you always heard, right? If that's an area where you desire improvement, well, Private Money Club, it's for you. PMC saves you precious time and money by bringing the real estate world, well, right to you, right in the palm of your hand. So get in on the action, like so many others have, by going to privatemoneyclub.com and sign up.
I think that has helped your career as well. I mean, because you're rubbing shoulders with people for
Sure.
the right reasons. You're in the right place with people that have the means, but those people aren't there because they feel like they're not being sold anything. They're there to give. So it's just the right connection. And I've really, really commended
And
you
what's
for what
wild
you've
to
done
me is that the fortune that it's brought me to my life, right? I met my wife at a charity event.
there. I did not know that.
Yeah. So, at the time she was Miss New York, she was there volunteering. And the story is that I had promised a donation to this charity, and I was going to go to it. Well, 5, 6 o'clock rolls around, end of the work day, and it wasn't a good day. I was exhausted, not feeling like going and being part of a charity event, right? And so, but I hadn't given my donation yet. So I'm like, shit, now I got to go home, change my clothes. And luckily I did, because at the event, we start chatting up, and the rest is history, right? Like, had I not gone to that event, I wouldn't have met my wife. And yeah.
And
so
you might not be a father either, because you have a 2.5-year-old now.
yeah. And that keeps us plenty busy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's that been like? What's changed since you had a child?
You know what? I'll tell you that I spent my 20s and 30s building businesses, right? And I didn't have my daughter till I think I was 39. I'm 42 now, so she's 2.5. The one thing was that I saw my parents struggle a bit, living paycheck to paycheck, and they were very old school. My mom was 18, my dad was 24, straight out of the Army, and they got married right away, started having kids, had 4 kids by the time my mom was 22, right? And my dad worked his ass off, and I know that's where I got my work ethic from. And we had always had food on the table, roof overhead, clothes on our back. No complaints there, right? But my intent was to kind of do things a little different, have kids later in life, be more established, go to college, start my businesses, yada, yada. And, we talked about it earlier in the podcast about, my retail stores going sideways and kind of having to readjust and transfer over into real estate. I will tell you that I'm very fortunate that what real estate has brought me is the ability to spend whatever time I need when I need it, right? So yes, there's plenty of times. Again, earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, I'm working 8 a.m. till 10:30 p.m. I get a couple breaks in between to spend some time with my daughter, put her down, but I can put it on pause, do what I need to do with my family, and then pick it back up. And then there's other days where it's like, I wake up today and I don't have much on my plate. I don't feel like working. I'm going to spend the morning with my daughter, which the ability to have that freedom and have that time is everything I was always looking for when I became an entrepreneur, right? And that was because there's only so much money that you're going to end up making that's going to keep you happy, right? So, when they talk about buying your time back, and my time is way more valuable than it's ever been now that having a wife and kid, and I genuinely enjoy the ability to just spend that extra time with my daughter. Because I know, and I feel terrible. Now, my dad died when he was 65. And he spent his entire life working his ass off to just be able to spend some time with us on the weekends, right? And that sucks. And that makes me feel terrible. Because the things that I see and the time that I get to spend with my daughter during the day that I know he missed, whether it was the first walk or the first talk or, them swimming and whatever it is, that you can't get that back.
Never. Well, time is that one resource that you can't put a price to it.
And trust me,
you don't get it back.
There's plenty of days and hours that the phone is just attached to my ear and my hip and I can't put it down. But then there's also days where it's like, the ability to just take that phone call. We took a road trip to Louisville last weekend. Just literally picked up on Thursday, drove 9 hours. The kid in the back, the wife's working on her laptop. I'm taking phone calls. Nobody had any idea that we weren't in our offices working, which is really neat. But then, to unplug and take that freedom with my family was just incredible.
Well, that's what everybody's seeking, right? They're seeking freedom of time. And if they're not seeking that, then they're missing out.
Yeah, and I think that's what real estate has brought me in understanding, especially with the rentals. At 30 doors, I think I get to 60 doors, 60 to 80, and I won't have to do anything else. I put it on cruise control, and I will never not work. That's not. I will constantly be doing something. But every time I add a door to my portfolio, that just brings a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. If I can pivot, because on that trip to Louisville you said you took, is that where your engine seized on the truck?
No, it was well before that. And they knew that I was taking this trip, and if it wasn't perfect, I was going to drive the truck through their showroom. I literally told them that. I said, if I get stuck on the side of the road with my family in the car, we're going to have a problem.
So that's what I want to pivot to as we kind of get to the tail end of this podcast. I want to talk a little bit about cars. It has nothing to do with anything else, but I've watched you do some things, and I didn't understand it, but I've seen it a little bit more now, and I just want to make sure that my thoughts are correct. So you've always had cool cars. Like I can't remember the very first car you had, Corvette, right?
I've had Corvettes, Vipers.
Vipers,
Yep,
yes.
The Vipers.
I remember the
R8,
Vipers.
Lamborghinis.
Yep. So let's those are all exotics.
Sure.
But let's stop at the Lamborghini. So recently you bought a brand new Lamborghini. I think it's brand new, or even.
So it was 2 years old. It might as well have been brand new. It had 1,800 miles on it. So
that's a brand new car.
It is, right? But I think there's some difference between buying a brand new sports car for me and one that's maybe 2 or 3 years old with a couple thousand miles on it, right? Somebody else is taking that depreciation. And my hobby, I love cars, and I get a new one, a daily driver or a new sports car, every year. I just like to try different things. But I don't have a big garage where some guys do with 10 cars in it that they collect, they never drive. I love to drive them, right? So that's my hobby. And listen, I don't like to lose money on anything I buy, right? And probably some of the things you may know, or your audience, understanding that with the income from the rental properties, right? Like, oh, these 2 properties pay for that car, right? Like the profit from those. So I kind of look at it that way. But the other way that I look at it is if I buy a used sports car with a few thousand miles on it, we live in New York, so we're not driving them 12 months out of the year. If we get 4 or 5, we're very lucky, and it's a secondary car. So I buy it, I drive it for a year or 2, put a few thousand miles on it, and then I generally sell it for pretty close to what I paid for it, and somebody else is taking the depreciation. I'm kind of like sampling these things, which is really nice, and it's fun.
But what I've witnessed you do, and because I'm always messaging you, I'm like, where's this car show? Where's that car show? Where are you at now? You go to all these car shows. Now, I know, you like cars, you like looking at other cars, but I've learned something in the time I've been on Earth, and that is if you put yourself in an audience where like-minded people are, and people that are driving, you have a Lamborghini and other people driving Lamborghinis or other sports cars, they have means, right? They have money. So by putting yourself there and having a common theme, has that helped your real estate business?
100%. I think that, rewind, being in my 20s and owning my own business, I immediately was put into a special group of other entrepreneurs in Western New York. And so whether it was charity events, golf events, or just doing business with other business owners, from the sign guy to the insurance guy to, whoever it was, we instantly had a connection, even with yourself. Nobody understood the problems that you had like another business owner. Not my wife, not my parents, not my brother, not my employees. And I think anyone that is an entrepreneur or a business owner, they've got a network of other entrepreneurs and business owners that they can lean on. And so in my 20s, I was literally hanging around with guys in their late 30s, 40s, and even in their 50s who are still my friends and business acquaintances today. So starting there, right, like I saw what the business did in networking with other people. Now fast forward to having the sports cars. I'm part of a car group, and we go to we do happy hours, or we go out to dinner, and other business owners, other millionaires that own these special cars, and we talk about our problems, but we also do business together. And specifically, when I went from owning a Z06 Corvette to the R8 that I have, my business from one year to the next increased 25% in sales. I went from 8 million, just under 8 million, to 12 million. And that 4 million was directly related, literally 4 million to the exact number of sales that I did because of new people that I met in that car group.
Wow.
And so, again, the people that I'm hanging around with, I'm now doing business with. And it's increased my sales, my network has grown, and it continues to grow because not everybody sells or buys a house every year, right? And it's paid for the Lamborghini and then some.
That's the coolest thing.
And I've said this before, don't go out and buy a Lamborghini or a supercar just to try to get new business. But if you can make them merge and it's seamless, I'll tell you, it's paid for itself all day long.
But I like that you stated that, and I want to restate that to the audience, because hearing that, some people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy the car because then I'm going to get the business. No,
and we'll get plenty of hate for saying that, but that's
fine. I got plenty of haters. No lack of haters.
I'm a little more sensitive. You're
Not
really
me.
out there.
I'm just kick you in the nuts, punch you in the face kind of guy. But so back to the cars, like you didn't just go out and buy these cars. You actually had the means to buy the car because of a real estate deal. And if I'm not mistaken, the Lamborghini, you had a beautiful Airbnb in Ellicottville that you sold, and you made a really nice profit. Now, I don't know this to be fact, but I think that is what bought the Lamborghini, correct?
Yeah. And the way that I look at it is also, right, I have these rental properties that you say, I'm doing the air quotes, the passive income. It's not so passive, but I can look at it and say, okay, I've got 30 doors right now. 3 or 4 of those doors pay for that Lamborghini. And I'm using other people's money is really what it comes down to. Even though it's mine, you just have to be smart about it. again, I don't have a garage with 10 cars in it. Some people do. That's great if that's for you. It's not for me. That stresses me out. That's more maintenance, more money that's just sitting there. I would rather go buy 5 more properties. And maybe I'll get there someday. And, when I'm 50 years old, which is, Jesus, right around the corner, but, there's going to be a point in my life where like, all right, this is good. I've got enough money to live. I've got enough money to give my family and support and my future generations. Maybe I will have 5 cars in the garage. But today it's like, I'm good with the 1 sports car. I'll get a new one next year. I like to try different things. My goal is kind of try everything that's out there.
Why not?
Why not? But you can only drive one at a time. And
That
then
is true.
when you have a kid, it's even harder.
I know, especially when you have a kid with a wife that doesn't want you to put your kid in the back of the sports car. I don't know if you struggle with that, but my wife will not let Vivi drive in the Porsche.
I don't know what to say there, but it's going to happen.
It's got to happen. I'm thinking it's going to happen this Sunday.
I think the next Cars and Coffee, there's going to be a car seat strapped into the Lamborghini. And I will tell you, my daughter, and it may not last forever, but she loves cars, and I love everything about it, right? And I'm not treating her like she's my son or everything, but I feel bad for the poor soul that's going to have to date her one day because Dada Lamborghini? Yeah, buddy, Dada Lamborghini. Now go tell your boyfriend that your dad's got a Lamborghini.
Yeah,
Step up, bud.
Vivi, the same thing. She just loves the car. She loves washing the cars with me.
Yeah.
She loves, when we go in the garage, she's always got to open the door, sit in it, and then she taps on the passenger seat. Daddy, get in the car.
That's awesome.
It's just, those are the moments that you remember, right?
No, and listen, I'm enjoying.
The cars will come and go,
Yeah.
but that memory will never die.
They're so fun. And people would tell me all the time, obviously not having a child until I was 39, all of my friends they've got teenagers now, if not older, right? And they would tell you, you'll never understand the love until you have your own. And I'm like, I've got a dog. I love my dog, right? There's no love like when you are raising another human being. I didn't know what to expect, but it's completely surpassed any expectations, like just completely blown my mind.
I completely agree. I mean, your daughter's 2.5, my daughter's 4, so we both started late.
Yeah.
And it's single-handedly been the biggest transformation of my life, and just in how I think and why I do what I do, and my struggles as well. Because like my struggles now are like I want to be done so I can come home and go to the pool with Vivi or see Vivi or do whatever. So everything shifts, and I never would have understood that before I had a child.
Well, and the hard part is, right, when you say you want to be done, right, at the end of the day and go home and unplug. There's some days where it's just, you've been for 24 hours straight, right? And now it's like, how do I put that on stop or pause and be a good dad or even be a good husband or a good person? Because I know that there's some days, i.e. last night, I was just miserable. Right? It was a shit day at work, and now I've got to unplug it, and it's not always easy, and your temper's short, and you're exhausted, and you're stressed. And we all struggle with some of that stuff, right?
100%. And I think that's just the nature of the beast. It's just what you're going to do. But you got to know when to shut it off, when to turn it on, and how to not bring that home to the kids.
But I also think, again, going back to the car thing, again, 7 years ago, before I got into real estate, I was holding on to a business that was dying, right? And if you told me that in 7 years I would own a Lamborghini and doing and have recovered like I have, some people know my story, and the video game stores took on a lot of debt. To this day, I'm still paying it off, and I could pay it off tomorrow if I needed to, but I'm kind of taking some of the advantages there and continuing to use my cash to invest into real estate to kind of eventually pay it off, right? But man, I was in a shitty place. I lost, I was losing my business, didn't know what to do, and that's what I started into real estate, and I've never made more money. I've never had more free time, and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And what's interesting is anybody that knows your career, and when we met, you were in retail, you had multiple locations, and I feel like, you're a couple years older than me. You started before I did, I've always sort of been in your shadow in the sense that I'm watching you and I'm like one step behind you. And when you surround yourself with people that are doing things that you want to do, they make it seem possible.
Yes.
Right? And that's one thing I've learned, especially being part of the car group. When I went from a Corvette to an R8, like that jump into a supercar, right? You just don't know it's possible. And then you're hanging around people that are doing it, and you see how easy it really is. Like yourself, you're in retail and you're opening multiple locations. Once I started being around you, because we were in the same plaza, and then seeing you own real estate, and see, like, I'm able to see that it's possible. And that's what surrounding yourself with like-minded people can do for you is, you want to have that goal or those aspirations to be like those other people or to be where they are. And being in my 20s, hanging around with business owners that have owned businesses for 20, 30 years and that were very successful, well, guess what? They rubbed off on me. I started talking like them and acting like them and dressing like them and networking like them and doing charity events like them, right? And then you become what you want and what they are.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's very important to always have that person that you're kind of, as you say, just tailing behind, that's doing the things you want to be doing. I've always had those people.
Sure.
In my younger years, I didn't, and that's why I got stuck at a certain point. I was hanging around people that actually, I was the top echelon of the people I was hanging out with, and I never could break through. So then I hate to say it, sometimes you got to fire or put your friends in time out if they're not going where you want and don't support what you're doing, and you got to find that next level. And that's when I did find it through masterminds and through spending money. It's always a component of you're going to have to spend to make.
Yep.
And, I remember spending money to go to these events that I couldn't afford.
Sure.
But when I got there, I got around these iconic people, founder of Uggs, founder of Make-A-Wish. I mean, these people that like you put on a pedestal.
Yep.
But then all of a sudden you watch their story, you learn their story, and you follow it, and all of a sudden you're that person next. And it just doesn't seem to take very long. But in the from the outside, people look at it and like, wow, you did that so fast. And it feels like a lifetime when you're actually
they're not seeing the behind the scenes. And the interesting thing is that you talk about putting these people on a pedestal, right? As they should be, because for good reason they've become successful. And then when you learn their story and you learn about them, you understand that they were just a normal person.
Yeah. Always just
and you're
normal
like,
people.
Then I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me that I've had somebody on a pedestal, I meet them, and I'm not saying, oh, they're good or bad, but then I'm like, that's them? They're just a normal person? Well, if they can do it, so can I.
Yep.
Right? So that's one thing that I've learned through the years being an entrepreneur, and we've all had our ebbs and flows, our ups and downs. And I'll tell you, losing one of my last businesses, right, with my back against the wall, and that's what got me into real estate, is I had no choice, right? But I will tell you, I think one of the things that I've learned after the fact with the video game stores going sideways was I stopped expanding. Right? And when I stopped expanding, you think, oh, you're just going to maintain. The second I stopped expanding, I started moving backwards. And that's when I kind of lost the business. There was a fear. I felt like I made it, right? Blue collar guy that came from not much, right? I built this business. I was holding on so tight. I'm like, I was scared to lose it. And that caused me to lose it, right? And now that I'm on the other side and I built another business again and become successful, it's like I'm going to learn from that experience. But now I know if this thing goes in the shitter, right? If let's just say the economy crashes, I lose my real estate, blah, 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 whatever, I'll just do it again. I didn't have that 7 years ago because I hadn't gone through it. So that experience and that loss, the knowledge that I gained from that, I'm not saying that I don't fear things, right? Because, you have a wife and a kid and a mortgage and bills to pay, right? Like there's always some sort of fear. But also the knowledge that I lost it once and I built it back up, let's go, I'll do it again.
I agree. I think sometimes that's the most cleansing thing. In the moment, it's the worst thing ever.
Oh,
but when you look
yeah.
back on it, you're like, if that didn't happen, I couldn't have gotten where I'm at. It's kind of like, if you can just envision a visual of, somebody holding a kite on a really windy day, and that kite, the wind is so strong that the kite is literally pulling you, but right in front of you is a cliff that if you go over it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Like you hold that kite because you don't want to lose the kite.
Sure.
And if you don't let go, you're going to die with the kite's going to take you over the cliff. So sometimes it's just easier to let go. Now that's a bad analogy, but like that's so many people get stuck in that thing that they just can't let go because they built it or because it's got sentimental value or something. Just let it go.
Well, and most people don't understand. I'm not saying they don't understand, but they're not willing to take that initial jump and realize, yes, it's a lot of work and a lot of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears. And then once you're in it, you realize how easy it is to make money in this world, right? There's money everywhere. And you can always, once you lose it, you can always make it again. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it can be done. We're going to live a long time, right? There's a lot of years out there of our life. And I think Gary Vee talks about it. He's like, most people are going to be living until they're 100 plus years old. So whether you're getting started in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is, you've got time. So, I almost got stuck in the rat race of the 9 to 5, and nobody in my family went to college when I was growing up. They were all blue collar people and homemakers. And so once I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, right? My best friend's brother-in-law owned a construction company. So a week after graduating high school, I was hanging drywall for 50 hours plus a week. And you know what that did for me? That year taught me what I don't want to do with the rest of my life. It was more valuable to me that 1 year than all 5 years in college, because I did not want to go back then. I was really cool in that I'm in real estate. I was able to see how a house was built. So kind of learned that early on. But I sure and shit don't want to go back to swinging a hammer for 50 hours a week for the rest of my life, right? So, I think about fast forwarding to when my daughter's 18 going to school. Like, I wholeheartedly believe that she should go get a job somewhere and see how tough it can be out there, right? And because once I went to college, after that year in construction, I took it real seriously. I was paying for my own school. I went to class. I wasn't fucking around. Right? Like, I got in to learn, get my degree, and get out. But I took it 10 times more seriously than I ever would if my parents were paying for it, or if had I gone right from high school right to college.
Or in today's world, if the government just pays your student loans off, right? Hitting below the belt. But I mean, like, literally, they don't take it as serious. So I like that you brought that up, because I think that's a really important thing. And I think it's going to be a really important thing for this next generation to know who's going to make it and who's really just going to kind of.
Yeah, and I think some eyes have been open over the last few years, because,
I hope so.
You've got kids going to college for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus years, taking on tons of debt, and then getting out of college and making 40, 50 grand a year with $200,000, $300,000 in debt. Now, I would say, again, I dodged another bullet. I got accepted into art school, Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and we went down there, and again, 25 years ago we're talking now, this school was 40 grand a year plus room and board. And my dad, after we did our visit, I'm like gung-ho, I'm like, I got accepted, I'm stoked, I'm going to school. My dad's like, Kev, he's like, you're not going to school. You're not going to art school, at least not there. He said, you're going to go $250,000 in the hole to be an artist. He said, how are you going to make money? I didn't have the answer. He said, you want to be a doctor? Go for it. I can see the return that you're going to get. And what's funny is I ended up staying locally, went to Buff State for graphic design, and they encourage you to find internships. At the time, I saw full-time paying jobs, not internships, full-time paying jobs in graphic design in Buffalo, $10 an hour. Dude, no lie, the very next day, registrar's office, business management, literally changed my degree the next day. I'm like, I already had a construction job making more than that.
How many kids do you think fall into that trap where they don't look at what the job's actually going to produce?
I think it's probably the majority of it. right?
You would think that'd
And
almost be a mandatory thing that the college shows you. Here's what you can expect to make in this profession.
I think it's big business, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Just the money that college costs. I'm just shocked. My wife's in the corporate world. And, once you've got some experience in the corporate world, the college you went to doesn't give a shit. A good friend of mine went to a big time college, and he said, you know what that taught me? Is that everybody that went to that college, that big time college, we do network together, right? So he's got that contacts. He's like, I'm not using it for my day-to-day job, but I know that if I come across a graduate from that same school, I've got that in, right? Or I can make a phone call to somebody that I met in college. And that's great networking, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But is it worth a couple $100,000 to some people? Yes. To most people, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I just watched my mother-in-law, who has no college education, isn't very good at grammar, can't really read or write very well, but became really good at one thing, facilities management, and spent years and years and years working in that field, learning that field and climbing the ropes. Yep. She just got a job and was able to literally call her pay and is making $100,000 plus benefits.
That's awesome.
This is a person with no education, like I mentioned, doesn't have the normal skills you would think are necessary, but she became a specialist in one thing. I mean, just think about that. That's what a lot of people are missing out on.
Especially if you're an entrepreneur, right? I think that if you can, again, if it's something you enjoy, great. But if you can hone in on a skill and specialize and become, I don't need to be the best house painter, right? But maybe I'm the best accent wall maker, right? Like you specialize in something that's through the roof, you'll always have work, right? And just hone in on your skill and be the best of the best.
I love that. Too many people want to be generalists.
I guess that was my point, right?
Yeah, generalist.
Yeah.
Too many people in real estate. It's prevalent in the financial advisory world. It was the most prevalent I've ever seen. A financial advisor, like when I was in it, everybody wants to say, "Oh, I do that too. Oh, I do this. I do this." But then now looking back, I would look at the ones that just did one thing really well, and they made 10x what the other advisors made, and they did one thing exceptionally well.
Right. If you can become known for that one thing, it just I think it snowballs, right? Like that specialty, and own it, make it your brand, and go with it.
I agree with that.
So
I think that's a whole nother podcast about brands and everything else. But since we're coming up on the top of the hour on this one, I definitely want to bring this to a close. So if people wanted to learn more about you, I know you have a podcast. How would they find out more about you?
So the podcast, it's a local podcast right now, local business owners. It's called Let's Know Buffalo. I'm on social media as Kevin McMullen, 716. Reach out to me. I do investment properties. I do sales, flips. I have rentals. And again, I as somebody who's in their 40s now, I have a lot of young people wanting to learn real estate. And I always tell them, listen, my passenger seat's always open. I'm not going to change my day, but if you want to show up at 8 a.m. and ride along with me for the day, I'll answer any questions you want and willing to open any doors I can to help.
Wow, that's great. And I think people should take advantage of that. So folks, if you're listening to this and you are from the 716 Western New York, get in his passenger seat. The amount you'll learn from him will take you light years ahead of where you're at. But with that being said, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Money School podcast. And Kevin, thanks for your time.
Cheers. Thank you.